So, my latest video, it's all about AI and art and what it means to be creative and all this kind of stuff. And I had absolutely no idea about any of the Pal World discourse that was getting about. And you don't even know what Pal World is, right?
I think I've seen it. I think I've seen the words Pal World like twice. I've been trying to avoid the internet, to be fair. So this is probably on me. Yeah.
Well, Pal World is it's Pokemon, where it's the bits about Pokemon that everybody talks about, where it's like, oh yeah, obviously Pokemon are slaves and they do stuff for humans, and they're basically just doing animal combat.
Yeah, like dogfighting.
Yeah. That's just like enhanced. It's just like an enhanced sort of like very obvious part of the game. But the thing that everybody's mad about, instead of like, I don't know, I think it's supposed to be satirical, but the thing that everybody's mad about is that they're saying that it's like AI and they used AI to make it and all that stuff. But when you like look a little deeper, it's kind of just like very, very creatively plagiarized a lot of the designs from Nintendo. And I just think it's like such a unique and interesting world that we live in now, where everyone is like hypersensitive to AI and things being made with AI, so that as soon as they see something that's like creatively bad, they're just like, no, it's AI. That's definitely AI. It's just such a really weird and unique situation that we're in. Anyway, that's our cold open for the show. Welcome in.
Pal World.
Power World. Yeah, think about it. It's Power World.
Here's my cold open. I'm drinking Twinings tea. Is that
Twinnings?
Twinings?
It's Twinings.
Okay, well, thank goodness I have a British friend. Because first of all, that protects me against any accusations of Britophobia. And secondly, you can correct me when I say things like Twinings tea. So now I know it's Twinings tea.
Well, the thing you should know about Twinings tea is it's definitely not something I can afford. So good for you. Don't know how you can don't know how you've got that over there in the States. Maybe it's more popular in the States. I don't know.
This is like bargain bin tea at my grocery
Really?
store. Yeah.
What? That's wild. No way. Twinings is like, it's known as like the posh
Are you serious?
tea brand. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm on Yorkshire tea, and you can get like 150 bags for I think it's £3 or something.
Okay, yeah, that's probably not the price that I purchased this at. But I have been thinking about like, what if I move to England? I'm actually thinking about visiting England, by the way, which I need to talk to you about, because I was thinking of visiting Manchester.
Whoa. Wow.
And just like seeing my friend Muel, because we're friends. We're actually friends.
Whoa.
Yeah, we're actually friends. And so I was like, what if I have friendship? Do friendship.
What if there was friendship? What
A
if?
call to action for friendship.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah, we should talk about that, but this might as well just bring it up live, because I never remembered to contact you despite the fact that we're friends. Anyways, I cut you off. Welcome to Red Planet. Sorry.
It's Red Planet, but the question is, what's the most base thing that you did this week?
Honestly, I've been a kind of a piece of shit. I've been like on absolute survival mode, trying to take care of this whole Twitch ban situation. Not doing well mentally. I tried to do a YouTube stream recently, and I just like had a panic attack, and it was just like, it wasn't very pretty. So apologies to anyone who was there and saw me like freak out. That's me just having a little bit of a moment. So I'm trying my best to like reel it back and try to do whatever I can to take care of myself. But I have been looking into like trauma and just like coming to terms with just the immense cartoonish amount of trauma I've experienced, like absurd amount. Now that I'm like thinking about it, I'm like thinking of things I haven't thought about. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen to me. Oh yeah, and that also happened.
Trauma is kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah, and also just recognizing that it's not just like a passing moment. These things like leave physical marks in your body. Like it actually etches like physically in your body. And so I don't know, I'm trying to just better acquaint myself with like the realities of what I've experienced and what I am continuing to experience, which is the tough part about trauma. If you're still experiencing a trauma, the thing that traumatizes you and there's no escape from it, it's kind of hard to heal. It's kind of hard to like be able to have that space where you're like, okay, now you're in a safe space. Cause I'm like, I'm not. I'm still fighting tooth and nail to like get my channel back and like, try to avoid fascist attacks, which is like plaguing me like all the fucking time. So I don't know. It's not as particularly based explicitly, but it's I feel like it's in the category of doing something in the direction of base, which is like self-care.
It's explicitly based. It's explicitly based. We've said this time and time again that like, self-care is entirely based. And I think that there's something to be said about trauma and understanding your trauma and how that affects you and going into your past and like accepting that and trying to reckon with it is super based, right? Especially if this is something that you're doing on your own time, independently, without the help of a therapist, because therapists can be very problematic sometimes. Well, a lot of the time, especially institution-based psychiatrists. And
I will say I am nervous about that. I haven't had a therapist. I've never really had a therapist. I've gone to therapy sessions, but I never like had a therapist consistently. And I'm considering it, but like, I don't know. Like I'm just exhausted at the prospect of it, like especially because I know how much like the field of psychology, because that was my major in college, how much the field of psychology does not like actually acknowledge the immense stress and hell that is capitalism, that is patriarchy, et cetera. It tends to, and forgive me if there's anyone listening right now that is like in the field and is actually very based about it. I am not talking about you. I'm talking about the vast majority. And I think you probably could agree of professionals in that field that tend to individualize things as being like, perspective issues, et cetera, when it just like, like it's very frustrating. It's a little bit gaslighty to constantly like focus on the individual and how the individual should be better coping with a reality that no human being should be coping with. No, none of us should have to grapple with these things. This should not happen. This is a hell world.
I'll tell you an interesting thing, and I remembered this. I'd actually blocked this out of my memory, but I remember this from because when in my stream this week or last week, one of my chatters was saying that this happened to them as well. But one of the things that I wanted to speak to my therapist about when I finally got around to getting like good therapy with the help of my parents, because I can't afford it myself. My therapist was talking to me about, talk to me about your political stuff and like, why that's bothering you and stuff, because I've mentioned that was a thing that was upsetting me. And I was saying things like, talking about all the bad things in the world. And this was back in like 2019. And I was talking about, just the situation in Palestine and stuff like that. And the guy stopped me and he went, I'm Jewish. And I said, well, I didn't think that was a problem. But he went, are you an anti-Semite? And I had to like... I knew what was going down, and I was like, you know what, dude? Let's not talk about that. No worries, man. That's all good. But, and this is a thing that happened. This is another thing that happens. Like, the therapists do not accept that trauma can come from having to witness people be genocided. It can come from things like that. This is a real thing. Like none of us, I think, are, I guess, built to witness these kind of things, no less the people who are going through it. You know what I mean?
Well, just close your eyes. Just shut your eyes.
Close your eyes. Pretend it's not happening.
LMAO. Just close your eyes. Just turn off the internet.
Funnily enough, that was his advice to me. He was like, well, he says, you don't have to ignore it, but compartmentalize it. And I was like,
isn't that actually like horrible advice? Isn't that like telling you to take your feelings and crush them down and not
crush them down? Only talk about them in a little bit. Yeah. A small portion of your life. So that is also something to
that reminds me of like one of the few times that I did go to a therapist. I was telling them how like when I closed my eyes, I saw animal cruelty, because at this point I was like very deep in the weeds of animal rights activism. And he kind of was just like scoffed at it, like he thought that like I was not making it up, but like he just kind of was just like, okay, well anyways, like I don't know how to explain his reaction because it was so bizarre to me. But now that it just feels like, shut up about the politics. That's silly. Let's talk about the diagnosable things that are in a textbook that are individualized and have no bearing, no relationship to the material conditions of this world.
Yeah, they literally say to you, don't worry about Palestine. don't worry about animals in abattoirs. Just live your life, be a productive person for capitalism, and don't think about that stuff. So yeah, so I do think it's extremely based. Coming back to the point,
This
I
is
do
such
think
a
it's
Mule and Kira episode. We're never Mule or Conrad's gonna hate us for this. We're 14 minutes in, and we're still talking about what base things I've done, which is
but
nothing except just
no,
like kind of hole, just like make a little hole in my friend's home because I hung out with them for a week, and I just like hung out in his living room. It was just like
no, it is based. That is based. That is based. It is based. I'm
he
telling you
does have a
now.
Palestine flag in front of his house though.
There you
So
go. There you go. You were
so base of me to say there. Yeah. Anyways, what about you? Let's get to you before we get sidetracked again. What base things have
yeah.
you done?
So yeah, it's always as per usual tenant union stuff. This week we went to one of our branches in that's like a more sort of deprived area in Manchester. It's a place called Middleton. It's really good branch. So many different people come there with exactly the same problems. There's an estate there that's owned by social housing provider. And this is the place I've mentioned this area before. It's the place where people have lived and they've had to have their kids go into hospital because they can't breathe. People have actually like gone into these houses and felt like the air on their chest and gone, oh my God, how do you live here? There was also there was basically a big meeting that we had, and it was helped organised by Dan, who is also in the Gaskell Garden Project, but he works for Manchester Tenants Union. Dan Isaac, he's been on Red Planet before talking about that stuff, and he had made this big presentation about housing and about like just educating the people who came there on how collective action, coming together and using your people power can get what you want versus going down like a kind of legal route. And in one of the bits of the presentation, he brought up one of these houses and what an independent surveyor had said about the houses. He said, these are the same conditions that cause rain clouds to form within this person's house. It's laughable, right? It's actually a joke. It's completely bizarre. It's like, what is happening?
I'm sorry, it's not funny, but like sometimes you have to laugh at like the absurdity of these scumbags, these absolute
literally
scumbags. Like, how scummy are you? Oh, you're so bad at maintaining a property for a person you're exploiting that it's literally creating its own atmosphere.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that we're faced with on the ground. And these people in these housing associations are just laughing at us. They're laughing at us. People are going and complaining to them, and they're just like, yeah, okay, we'll send someone out, and then they never send them out. They've been told that someone in the housing association who doesn't work there anymore has told one of our members that basically like, we do this thing called a soft knock, which is where we basically like knock as soft as we can and then leg it, basically. And then we say, we tried to get you, but you weren't in. It's just a joke. So we were there essentially doing what we call an agitation session. And I've been to Middleton a couple of times, the branch there, and it is always the same in Middleton because they don't have anyone to talk about this stuff with. So they come there and it's basically like a big venting session. And there were multiple times in the meeting where we had to say to everyone there, like, look, let's just crack on with the thing because we got more to get through because everybody just wanted to complain about their housing, and understandably. So it was a big agitation session, and we got a new member. We got some people who were interested in like just, joining the dispute as part of the collective whole, which was really good. So that was really, 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 really good. And I'm also doing the different disputes related to individual members that I'm currently dealing with at the minute. Lots of stuff going on. Can't remember it all off the top of my head. But yeah, lots of tenants union stuff as per usual. So there you go. And we want to hear, actually, if you have done anything based. We want to know what based things you've been doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and your pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. But we're going to do the news now. And I didn't know that this first news bit was my news bit. So that's my bad. I should have let you say the bit about the base viewers so it flowed a bit better and gave you more airtime, because you're my friend and my co-host and my real life friend.
And you're not sexist. You're not trying to speak over women.
I'm always speaking over women, and I'm doing my best to, like, you know, not do that. But anyway, we'll we'll crack on with the news. So here we go. First news piece is about the United States still dropping bombs in the Middle East.
What?
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine that? What? Wow, crazy. But you should vote for the Democrats, though, because the other guy's worse.
Wait, the U.S. is also still occupying Iraq?
Whoa, what? There's still...
And more people need to talk about this. Every day we need to be like, yeah, another day goes by that the U.S. has not pulled out of Iraq.
Yeah.
Just by the way.
I think that's really important, actually. Yeah.
Like, so many people don't know.
No. Everyone's just like, oh, they came out of Afghanistan. That's the same country, right? That's literally how people think. So yeah, this story is obviously, you know, we're highlighting the fact that this has been ongoing for a long time. But the United States has executed airstrikes on several locations in Iraq and Syria this Friday, targeting assets of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated militia groups. The airstrikes were a response to an attack at a US base near the border of Syria and Jordan, which killed 3 soldiers on the 28th of January. Iraqi officials have said at least 16 are dead in the airstrikes, including civilians. US Central Command claims the attack struck 85 targets, including command and control operations, intelligence centers, and drone storage facilities. President Biden has said that attacks, quote, will continue at times and places of our choosing, despite also claiming the United States, quote, does not seek conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world. Interesting. The US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has stated that more American attacks should be expected. It is widely believed that the Islamic Resistance, who has claimed responsibility for the January 28th attack on the US base known as Tower 22, was armed, trained, and funded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. However, Iran continues to deny involvement in the attack on the US base, saying it was, quote, not involved in the decision-making of resistance groups. Following the attack, Iran's foreign ministry further responded by saying the strikes, quote, will have no result other than intensifying tensions and instability in the region. In addition to the bombings in Iraq, another wave of joint strikes by the US and UK against Houthi targets in Yemen were executed on Saturday. This is the third such joint operation which seeks to stop the actions of the Houthi in the Red Sea, who have been attacking commercial shipping vessels bound for Israel. Now, Kira, have you got any thoughts on this? I know we're going to be talking a bit about this later, but initially, anything to add?
Yeah, so we will, like you said, we're definitely going to be talking about this later because today's episode's going to be discussing the history of Yemen and, you know, obviously the history of the Houthis in Yemen. But I will say that what Iran is saying is pretty consistent with what it says with regards to other groups. So Iran is known as like the leader of the axis of resistance, and that it helps to lead a bunch of different groups in the Middle East to basically like share the common goal of fighting against the West and Israel, the Israeli occupation. So Iran can participate in coordination, and they do admit to when they do participate in coordination, but a lot of their influence is funds that does not have any sort of follow-up kind of dictation of like what to do with them. If my understanding is correct, I believe the Houthis are also involved in Iran in that regard, and that Iran funds the Houthi or provides funds. I don't want to say completely, but provides funds for the Houthis, but does not dictate specifically what the Houthis should be doing. So for Iran to say this, it seems pretty consistent with their MO effectively. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about it.
Cool. Give us the next story.
I will. Protests have broken out in Mexico City over water shortages. So this week, residents in and around Mexico City protested following weeks of water shortages, with some residents having been without water in their homes for more than a month. Officials have called the present situation unprecedented, with reserves down to less than 40% in the infrastructure system, which provides water in Mexico City, down from 54% this time last year. So Mexico has been suffering from a water crisis for several years now. It was built on a lake in a high altitude valley. The city is dependent on rainfall to maintain its underground aquifer and supply its 6 million people. However, recent years have seen a considerable reduction in precipitation, and it is expected to be months before the situation improves with the summer monsoon season. Even then, the shift in weather could lead to more problems due to the, quote, whiplash effect, which is a situation in which sudden changes in wet conditions leads to flooding in urban areas. So the situation in Mexico City is yet another example of the dire, immediate need to address climate change, something we expect to see repeatedly in the coming years. And it also should be said that climate change does affect the most vulnerable and the most blameless the most, just by virtue of not only just the locations in which we're seeing climate change kind of like kick into gear the hardest, but also the nature of which people without funds, without power, can't really escape the climate, whereas Bezos can, go to one of his many homes and just live on a hill, just kind of uses money to stay safe. So solidarity with all the victims of climate change, especially the most vulnerable of us. But Muel, could you tell me what's going on in New Zealand?
I can, yes. So outrage over plans to unwind Maori policies may confront New Zealand's leaders at Waitangi Day events this week. So crowds at this weekend's anniversary of New Zealand's founding document signing in the town of Waitangi are expected to be their biggest in 30 years as Indigenous Maori plan to discuss and protest proposed policies that some say will disadvantage them. The main celebrations will be held on February the 6th, marking the day in 1840 when the Treaty of Waitangi was first signed between the British Crown and more than 500 Maori chiefs. New Zealand's centre-right coalition, which took office last year, is promising to undo policies of previous governments, particularly those promoting the official use of the Maori language and seeking to enhance Indigenous living standards and rights. The government has also said it will introduce, but are not committed to passing, a bill that would reinterpret the Treaty of Waitangi. Critics say the moves are the most significant step backward for Maori rights in decades, and some have taken legal action against the government in an effort to stop the policy changes. Outraged by the government's proposals to drastically unwind policies that support Maori and to review the country's founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi, Maori have galvanized across tribes and movements in a way not seen in decades. Some of the government's attempts are already being challenged in the courts, and given the level of opposition from well-funded Maori organisations, the list of challenges will grow. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, with Deputy Prime Minister and New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters and ACT Leader David Seymour, have signed to a coalition that will either repeal or review at least a dozen Maori-related policies. It includes abolishing the Maori Health Authority, set up to address appalling health disparities, and rolling back the use of the endangered Maori language, Te Reo Maori, in government departments. Those political parties mentioned are some of the worst, most reactionary parties in New Zealand. If you want to see someone absolutely dunk on them, you can check out our co-host Tim's Twitter. He's always talking about how horrific losers ACT are. Speaking in the Pauweri, I don't know if I'm getting the pronunciation of that right, so apologies, welcoming ceremony. I also don't know if I'm going to get this word right either. Nyapui leader Hone Sadler acknowledged the anger and hurt many felt towards the coalition, but urged them not to stoop to its level. Let us remain peaceful, humble, but don't drop our guard. They will be here to share their thoughts. Let them know our thoughts and feelings. Let us look for prosperity of unity, he said. The Manohiri guests responded with a call for peace, love, and unity. Baden Barber of Nagati Kahungunu said Maori must stand up and fight, but not with violence. Unite, unite, for we must be united. We have representation of the whole country and acknowledging the sacred documents. He Wakaputanga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi remain steadfast te iwi Maori. This is the right place to meet and unite, to convey our thoughts, our ideas, he said. Protest has long been part of Waitangi celebrations, and in 1995, official events had to be cancelled due to anger over government policies. In 2016, a minister was struck in the face by a dildo thrown by a woman protesting a trade agreement.
And that woman was me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Everyone stands up. I'm the dildo thrower. No, I'm the dildo thrower.
No, I'm the dildo thrower.
Okay, anyway, sorry. Go on.
No, that's it. Yeah, I think this is something that we're seeing across the imperial core, right? This is more and more reactionary policies, more and more reactionary governments, just fighting back against what is essentially growing left-wing ideas, growing left-wing movements. Again, you know, the views of these are not of the many, the views are of the few. They are determined to divide and rule, maintain the imperialist hegemony that the imperial core has over the world. And this is just, you know, yet another slap in the face to indigenous people in New Zealand, Maori, who for years and years and years, you know, decades, or I think centuries actually, like, you know, just had this horrific oppression and attempt to erase their culture and erase you know, just them as a people anyway, by the colonial powers. So just absolutely horrific. But we've got more of that in the next piece, and we got the big Palestine update by our wonderful host KiraChats, and my actual friend. She's right here to talk to you about that.
Yeah, we are friends. This is true. So just like every week, I'm here to bring you the updates on the last week, what's going on in Palestine. And just like every week, I'm going to tell you that this is not a comprehensive review of all of the immense atrocities going on in Palestine. When I was trying to write this section last night, I was just like, I could be talking for such a long time, because it is remarkable how many war crimes the Zionist entity manages to churn out in just a week. And a variety of them, not just the same ones, like a variety of them. We're talking about taking Palestinian men prisoner, blindfolding them, putting them on a bus, and then forcing them to acknowledge one particular occupying soldier's family and say that they will all bow down to be slaves for them. Like, there are several instances of Israelis forcing Palestinians to announce that they are now slaves. It's really fucked up. So just to say that this is not a comprehensive review, but I'm going to try to get to the bigger chunks that people are discussing. So about 9 days ago, the ICJ ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, which is a huge deal. This is a huge results that many Palestinian allies are applauding. So, in the interim ruling, the court in the Hague, ordered Israel to abide by 6 provisional measures. Among these, the court ordered Israel to take all possible measures to prevent genocidal acts, to prevent and punish direct and public incitement to genocide, to take immediate and effective steps to ensure the provision of basic services and humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza, and to preserve evidence of genocide and to submit a report to the ICJ within a month, laying out how it is complying with all these orders. So I thought it would be fun if we went down the line and checked out, how is Israel doing? It's been about a week since the ICJ has ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide and that they need to immediately take these measures. Let's take a look to see what's going on. So for the first point, that the first order that the court administered, which is take all possible measures to prevent genocidal acts. Well, since the ICJ's ruling, Israeli occupation forces have murdered at least 981 Palestinians and have injured at least 1,655. Just recall that half of the population in Gaza is children. The Zionist entity has also continued targeting multiple hospitals, including tanks bombarding Nasser Hospital and now a 12-day siege on Al Amal Hospital in Khan Yunis, putting even more strain on the immensely devastated healthcare system in Gaza. And refugee camps continue to be assaulted, including so-called safe zones and a multitude of other genocidal acts. But it just should be said that they are not actually satisfying in the least bit the first order, which is take all possible measures to prevent genocidal acts. And it should be also noted that all these kind of feed into each other. So the next, all these orders. So the next order, the ICJ ordered Israel to prevent and punish direct and public incitements to genocide. So just note that explicit calls for genocide constituted a very large part of South Africa's case against Israel. Is kind of a smoking gun, because it's one thing for a state to do something and then, claim that it was an accident, bystanders, etc. It's another thing. And by the way, it doesn't mean it's not genocide, to be clear. But in terms of like a smoking gun that you can point to, if you've been following the situation in Palestine, you'll know that Israel has no shortage of moments. The leadership has, and from everywhere from the leadership down, has just been happy to announce that they're committing a genocide. So for instance, citing scriptures, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said himself in a televised address in late October, "You remember what Amalek has done to you. The Amalekites were persecutors of the biblical Israelites, and in scriptures, God commands them to be destroyed." So he's effectively saying, destroy Palestinians. 2 days after the Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th, Gallant, which is Yoav Gallant, who is the Minister of Defense of Israel, said Israel's fighting human animals when he announced a complete siege on Gaza. Speaker Nissim Vaturi from Netanyahu's Likud party wrote on X, Twitter, aka Twitter, that Israelis had one common goal: erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Israeli Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu from far-right Jewish Power Party suggested that Israel drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza and said they were, quote, no uninvolved civilians, quote, in the territory. So there is way more, but those are just a taste of the types of rhetoric that we're seeing out of Israel. And this is not just coming out of Israel. These are the people in power that are actually dictating the course of events, the assault on Palestinians. So none of these figures have stepped down. None of these figures have been forced to step down. And none of these statements have been addressed by Israel. So going back to Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, which is one of the 3 Israeli officials that was explicitly criticized personally by South Africa the judges of the ICJ for their genocidal comments, has not been taken into custody. He's not been forced to step down. Instead, he's still in power, and he has made it clear that Israel does not intend to cease its war on Gaza nor change its behavior, saying, quote, "We are achieving our missions in Khan Yunis. We will also reach Rafah and eliminate terror elements that threaten us." So if you are familiar with Rafah, Rafah is the southernmost city on the Gaza Strip. It borders Egypt. It's one of the 3 places that you can exit the Gaza Strip. You can't exit anywhere else. You can't exit by sea because you'll get sniped either by the Israeli military or by the Egyptian Navy. So Israel has instructed Palestinians to go to Rafah, to flee through the Rafah border, and that this is one of the quote unquote safe zones. So as of this moment, about 50% of Gaza's 2.3 million remaining residents are in Rafah. So by this motherfucker, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, saying that they are now going to eliminate the terror elements that threaten us in Rafah, seeing how they have repeatedly, time and time again, just completely bombarded civilians, corralling them and completely bombarding them with weapons, with bombs and massacring families. Gallant's comments can only be considered as an expression of further intent to commit genocidal massacre on Palestinians. And in fact, the rhetoric has continued even further. National Security Minister Ben Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich are both far-right both from far right parties in Israel, attended a settler conference in Jerusalem last Sunday, calling for Israel to rebuild settlements in Gaza and establish more in the occupied West Bank. Their unfettered genocidal comments have not been condemned by anyone in power in Israel. And it should be said that annexing Gaza and basically gentrifying it for Zionist expansion it's not like a secret that this is something that Israel's wanted to do for even prior to Israelis have been settling in Gaza and then they were forced to leave. And at that point, throughout this entire process, it has just been nothing but a plan to expand Israel, not just through Gaza, not just to gentrify Gaza. And maybe Muel, you can speak to this for a second to explain how like Netanyahu is shown like a map to talk about greater Israel and expanding it even further. So like expanding to Gaza, this isn't like a secret. This isn't some far right, like kind of whack job fantasy. This is something that like real estate agents already like making plans for. They're already like making they're making blueprints. They're already trying to sell the land.
Yeah. So. Yeah. He showed a map literally to the UN. It wasn't even, the audacity of these fascists is beyond the pale, really. This map included areas of Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Sudan, and it was called Greater Israel. And this is not like, we're going beyond the kind of biblical claims that Zionists like to bring when it comes to settling and colonizing Palestine. This now becomes a further, which is what Israel always has been, which is an arm of imperialism in the Middle East for the imperial court, and that's all it has been. To try and get to this point where Israel is basically systematically wiping out not just the countries in the Middle East, no matter what kind of criticisms you might have of like Saudi Arabia or whatever country in the Middle East, Egypt, it would be violent imperialist colonialism, and just having that laid out at the UN, and nothing be done, nothing even be done with regards to like the US or the UK saying like, oh, maybe you want to rein it in a bit now, chief. It just says everything. It just says everything about it. I was actually like flabbergasted the first time I saw it. But you could Google it. You could just Google Netanyahu Greater Israel map, and that will pop up. It's all there for people to see. This is not something that people should be taken lightly. I did say this though. I did say today on Twitter, because people are getting kind of doomy about what's going on in Gaza, and I get it, like, for real, but I think Kira could probably attest to this, in that like the way that, and I think we've discussed this before, I think we discuss this pretty much every time, but I think it does bear repeating just so everybody doesn't feel super depressed and super upset about it. If this is like the first time that you've been woken up to the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, arguably the way that everybody is now talking about it, the way that there have been so many direct action examples, the way that there's been so much solidarity internationally, forced divestments, and the ICJ case being discussed, actually being discussed, I think is way better than any of us thought that this would go. Every single person who's been out there supporting Palestinians and talking about the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians for years has always dreaded the day when Israel came to genocide Gaza, like invade Gaza and completely destroy it. We all knew it was going to happen because they were talking about it. But I think the way we thought it would go down is they would just do it and no one would notice, because no one has noticed any of the other massacres over the last 75 years. So the way that it's gone is actually like, it's been like a net positive as far as I'm concerned with like the movement as a whole. It's obviously still horrific, and genocide is happening right now in front of our eyes, and it would be good if more things were done about it. But I don't want anyone to get sort of too doom and gloom about this. It's a lot better that more people are speaking about it. And anyway, sorry, I'm sort of digressing a little bit from our report here, from your amazing detailed report. So
No, no
apologies.
problem. I just want to say, Danarchist in the chat just informed us that all of Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, parts of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Egypt is greater Israel, which is a massive amount of Arab land. So yeah, let's get to the next order that the ICJ has demanded that Israel comply with, which is to take immediate and effective steps to ensure the provision of basic services and humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza. So it should be noted that apart from the bombs, which is like the most graphically, like visually impactful elements of the genocide, in my view, it should be noted that the deliberate prevention of aid to Gazans has been a key pillar in Israel's genocide of Palestinians. And this isn't new. This has been the reality of how Israel has been, the siege on Gaza has been happening since Gaza was handed back to Palestinians. That's what the siege is for, to control all of the basic needs, the medicine, water, fuel, everything, food, so that Gazans are still, even though they have quote unquote sovereignty, they're still under occupation effectively. So now that's expanded even further, and Israel is thoroughly preventing Gazans from receiving humanitarian aid. The continued siege on Gaza, Israel's aggressive screening of aid, aka the rejection of much, if not most, of the aid that is trying to get through the border, and Israeli occupation forces destroying aid that does make it through, and Israel's unfettered violent bombardment of aid routes and desperate civilians have very effectively and deliberately led to basic humanitarian provisions not being provided to Gazans. And I will also remind you yet again that recall that half of Gaza's population is children. So we're talking about the deliberate prevention in some way, shape, or form, whether it be like stopping the trucks, whether it be bombing the trucks, whether it be allowing the trucks through, but then torching torching the food that is inside the trucks, killing civilians trying to access these trucks, forcing civilians to not even be able to get near them. Like there's so many different angles to which Israel is pursuing this. Right now on screen, you're seeing the IOF officers torching aid in a truck and doing so proudly and uploading it to the internet as a brag, just to be perfectly clear of the caliber of scumbag we're dealing with here. Even more egregious, the very same day of the ICJ ruling, Israel conveniently alleged, without evidence, that 12 employees of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, aka the UNRWA, had been directly involved in the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. This is 12 employees of thousands, for the record, and without evidence. Following this very egregious inflammatory accusation without evidence, the United States, the UK, Germany, and a bunch of other major European donors suspended their funding to the UNRWA, which, by the way, is the main humanitarian agency in Gaza that provides food, shelter, and medical supplies. No other humanitarian agency can replace the UNRWA or match its services in Gaza. Without this aid, Gazans will some fucking how suffer even more profoundly than they have before. Chris Gunnis, which is a former UNRWA spokesman, said the UN agency has weeks only before it runs out of money for its crucial aid work to save Palestinian lives in Gaza. And by the way, the aid that is coming through is so scarce. We're not talking about like, all this aid coming through and now they're going to run out. We're talking more than 90% of Gazans are without water, without food, without medicine. Like, we're talking immense despair, immense dispossession, and we're even seeing that little aid going to run out at this rate, given the accusations that Israel made that these cowardly countries have decided to bend the knee to.
And it should also be mentioned that, two things really. Critical support to Norman Finkelstein who basically made the tweet this week saying, "Wow, shock horror! People in Hamas also have day jobs." Which I thought was pretty funny because yeah, true. Like, you know, if you're in Hamas, you're not just like, you know, getting paid by Hamas like to do military stuff. Like, you're gonna have a job. So they might be like an UNRWA school teacher. They might be an UNRWA you know, aid officer or whatever. Like, they could be doing that stuff, of course. You know, UNRWA is historically been in Gaza for decades, right? Like, you know, there are UNRWA schools, there are UNRWA, you know, all these different institutions. And also, I don't know if you knew this, Kira, but that number of 12 UNRWA you know, aid workers being involved in Hamas apparently is now actually been walked back to 4. It's actually already been walked back to 4. It was almost I think 4 days after that.
This is so classic Israel. This is so classic Israel. They love to overshoot and then they go back, which is nothing. Gaza, note that the government of Gaza never does this. They're never like overshooting death tolls. They're always undercounting. They're always providing names for everyone. And if they can't, you know, it's incredible. We're always seeing Israel just try to like have a temper tantrum and make a scene. And then later we're like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, actually, yeah, we were just made a lot of shit up.
Yeah, this was 5 days ago, and this was from the actual Israeli intelligence report. You know, 4 UNRWA staff out of 12,000. You know, 12,000 employees. It's a joke.
Well, I guess now millions of children should die, I suppose, or 1 million children. I think, because about 2.3 million in Gaza, so about 1 million kids. I guess they should just die because 4 people maybe did something that Israel doesn't like. So I guess now everyone has to suffer and die.
Well, I think it's like this actual like turn to focus on the blocking of aid, because as well, it's not just you know, this accusation and the cutting of funding to UNRWA. It's also the this has been galvanized and you know, acted upon by Israeli extremists in Israel. They're well in Palestine, but like, you know, on the border of Gaza, they're basically now protesting aid trucks going into Gaza at various different points. And it's like,
if you've seen videos of this, I should have included one of these actually. My apologies, because I have sometimes a hard time doing these segments because I don't know how to like talk. I don't know how to do this. Like, how do you properly express the level of evil that we're witnessing when people holding Israeli flags are blocking aid trucks to genocided people that are dying, children that are dying? Like I don't know. I don't know how to like properly like just exist in that world. How do I put a sentence together that makes any sense to that scenario? I want to continue saying with what Chris Gunness was saying, because he's a former spokesperson of the UNRWA, which you're calling UNRWA. I never heard of that pronunciation because I don't talk to people, so I just talk in my own head. That's the way I say UNRWA in my head. But he also says, my message to the Arab world, particularly to the Gulf, is where are you? Because they're making billions each day on oil revenues. A tiny fraction of those oil revenues would see UNRWA's financial problems disappear overnight. This unconscionable gap inflicted by these Western countries would be filled very quickly. Some of the most desperate people in the Middle East are now facing starvation. They're facing famine, and the Arab states need to step up to the plate. This does echo a lot of what my Arab viewers have told me about their frustrations with other Arab countries. Like, let's just talk about Egypt. Egypt's navy snipes Palestinians that venture, quote unquote, too far out to sea. Like, they are part and parcel. They are linking arms with Israel and maintaining the siege on Gaza for their own, you know. We can have a whole conversation about Egypt's motivations, but and Egypt's not part of the Gulf, so we can specifically Chris here is talking about, you know, kind of focusing on the Gulf the most. But it should be said that there is some betrayal occurring, and this is not something that Palestinians are very like foreign to. They've experienced a lot of betrayal from other entities in the Arab world. And as I'm not Arab, I'm not going to speak too much about that. Maybe we should have a guest on to discuss that, because it's a very important conversation we had. But as an American, I can fully, with my full chest, say fuck the USA.
Yeah. And fuck the UK as well, by the way.
Fuck the UK, yeah.
Yeah.
Note that prior to this, Israel has been bombing, massacring UN buildings in Gaza and the people in those buildings, to which the Western and Gulf countries have apparently not taken any issue with. So major concern for Hamas potentially out of 13,000
yeah.
UNRWA employees. That's the biggest most horrible thing they've ever heard. But if you straight up just bomb UN buildings in Gaza, that apparently is just not a problem whatsoever. The last thing that the last order that the ICJ court demanded that Israel comply with, which is to preserve evidence of genocide and to submit a report to the ICJ within a month, laying out how it is complying with these orders. Now, it hasn't been a month completely yet, but I'm just going to say LMAO, no, you're not doing this.
I mean, that's exactly what is in the notes.
I just wrote LMAO, no. I'm not even going to fucking bother. What am I going to do? Like, look for evidence of their, I don't know. They're clearly not compliant. They've completely ignored what the ICJ is saying. Basically they're just kind of ramping up their genocide, which is was explicitly said by South Africa is like a thing that could very well happen, that they've seen this before, which is why these provisional measures need to be taken, because that's what genociders do. They try to, finish the job.
I genuinely think that they've pivoted to this aid stuff because they think it's harder to prove genocide with, not that they would care, by the way. I think that should be made obvious to everyone. Like, Israel will not care what any ruling is if they rule that they are doing genocide in Gaza. They're not gonna stop it. They're gonna continue with their plan. This is their plan. And I think the reason that they've tried to pivot to this aid stuff is because it's harder to, because they do know that they're losing the media war. They're going to act belligerently still towards, Palestinians. But I do think that they are very aware of the effect that this kind of action is having on the way that the Palestinian struggle is viewed worldwide. And I think that is why they are trying to pivot to this, no, we should just attack the aid. If we focus on the aid and then everyone's going to talk about the aid, then no one's going to look at the bombings. No one's going to look at the white phosphorus. No one's going to look at the other stuff. No one's going to look at the US and the UK backed planes coming over, This is
a pretty tried and true is Zionist propaganda method, which is to distract with scandals, for instance, claiming that Hamas did orchestrate a mass rape campaign on October 7th. Yeah. And which, by the way, has zero evidence backing it. It's just literally no evidence. There's no victims.
There's actually far more evidence to point that Israel made that stuff up than there is 100%. That it happened. Yeah.
And by the way, I should just say that if it ends up being true, I take sexual violence extremely seriously as both a feminist and also a victim of sexual violence. I wouldn't fall out of my chair if it turns out a member of Hamas raped, right? But it's the claims that Israel's making we're talking about a compulsive liar that has lied through its teeth since it was created, and nearly everything it says is a lie to serve its interests, to try to further, occupy and genocide. Then saying, trust me, bro, this totally happened. And then just recycling a very, very anti-Arab Islamophobic trope, which is evil brown men raping pristine white women,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
this is just, I'm sorry, I don't believe you until you provide me with evidence, and Israel's provided nothing but you need to believe women. And I just need to say, believing women, don't mistake that with believe Israel. So the US federal court acknowledged the ICJ ruling in a very kind of, like, I want to say in a good way. God forbid I say anything good is coming out of a US court, but the US federal court acknowledged the ICJ ruling. And I'll tell you how they did that. So this is the latest development in the Defense for Children International Palestine versus Biden trial. So if you're not familiar, this trial began in November 13th, 2023, where Palestinian human rights organizations and together with individual Palestinians in Gaza and the US filed a lawsuit in U.S. federal court against Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Austin, basically the Biden administration, for the U.S. officials' failure to prevent and their complicity in the Israeli government's unfolding genocide against Palestinians, their families, and the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. So unfortunately, while the court did dismiss the case on jurisdictional grounds recently, saying that the preferred outcome is inaccessible to the court, and it found that it lacked power to resolve the case because it implicated executive decision-making in the area of foreign policy. It did affirm the ICJ's decision in an unprecedented win for pro-Palestinian advocacy. And I'll tell you what they said. They said, this is the U.S. federal court said, both the uncontroverted testimony of the plaintiffs, the Palestinians, and the expert opinion proffered at the hearing on these motions, as well as statements made by various officers of the Israeli government, indicate that the ongoing military siege in Gaza is intended to eradicate a whole people and therefore plausibly falls within the international prohibition against genocide. The court also recognized the substantial role of the United States in furthering the genocide and noted that, quote, as the ICJ has found, it is plausible that Israel's conduct amounts to genocide, quote, and therefore, quote, the court implores the Biden administration to examine the results of their unflagging support of the military siege against the Palestinians in Gaza. The court also stated, quote, it is every individual's obligation to confront the current siege in Gaza, end quote. While the plaintiffs' attorneys strongly disagree with the court's dismissal of the case, they also backed the court's conclusion about Biden's administration's complicity in genocide, saying, we urge the Biden administration to heed the judge's call to examine and end its deadly course of action. Which is pretty amazing that a U.S. federal court, and I don't know what's going to come of it, knowing the way that shit works, probably nothing, but it's pretty amazing that the U.S. federal court is directly telling Biden, fucking stop. You are a genocider and you need to stop right now.
It's really interesting. And I think that the only thing that we can take from this is that this will be a record, right? This will be a record of his legacy as president for the future. I think that's the only thing that we can get excited about because of this. You know what I mean?
It
like
also,
you said.
It also strikes me as like pretty phenomenal that pretty amazing, I should say, that so many liberals keep trying to stress that Biden is this like really nice guy and like you can't blame him for he's just the president when things are like messy and like war is blah blah blah. And this uniquely points out Biden and his administration as culpable.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that because this isn't just yet another guy in power. Don't get me wrong, like every US president's a fucking war criminal, but we're talking about like notably a war criminal, like a notable, the courts have notably like confirmed this.
I know that like Twitter is not a great website to be on, and it's definitely not a good platform, but I have really enjoyed being unbanned on there because I have seen some of the absolute liberal brainworms about this, and some of them are really funny. Like, for example, today I saw someone saying that, hey, listen, I know that we don't have a great choice right now, but with Coca-Cola, I would always choose Diet Coke over full fat. And that's just so funny because Coca-Cola not only supports Israel and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, but it also sent death squads to Colombia, didn't it? When they tried to unionize in the factory there. So, you know, really just sort of highlighting, you know, that person really thought they were saying something, but what they actually did was highlighted the importance of not actually just not doing a choice and doing something different, which is like boycott the entire thing, right?
Also, Coke doesn't have fat in it. I don't know if you're misremembering that or if they
No,
said
this is what this person said in the tweet. Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah, normal.
a few more stories, and then we have to move on to Yemen. So there's, like I said in the beginning of this section, there's like so many war crimes being committed by Israel. Like I can't. Let me just tell you about some of the things that are also happening. This actually happened in Jenin, which is a city in the West Bank, which is not in Gaza. Just to let you know, the genocide is also, Israel is also genociding Palestinians in the West Bank. The ICJ focusing, South Africa focusing on Gaza, in my opinion, is because it's much easier to prove genocide there than it is in the West Bank. But it should be said that there's Israel's absolutely genociding Palestinians in the West Bank. If you take a second to even like look over there to see what's happening. For instance, Israeli forces disguised as medics raided a hospital in Jenin and executed 3 Palestinian patients in their beds. Again, note that this is the West Bank. This is not Gaza. Also, every accusation's a fucking confession for these motherfuckers. One of the victims was a Palestinian man who was just in the hospital for 4 months after being paralyzed by missile fragments from an Israeli drone strike. Disguised Israelis shot him, quote, in the head at point blank range. But pro-Palestine protests continue. So I hope some of our listeners and our viewers are participating in these protests, because it's really important that you get out there and scream about how this is absolutely horrendous and it needs to stop. Continued protests are happening all around the world. And what was really cool, I saw a video of U.S. Olympic marathon trials where runners were holding Palestinian flags, which is really awesome to see. Washington, D.C., there's protesters that shut down numerous major roads in protests against the genocide and for Palestinian, a free Palestine, which is pretty amazing. So I'm encouraging all of y'all to get out there and protest. If anything, it feels good to be around other people that give fucks, because sometimes it can feel really alienating and lonely. And kind of a last story, kind of an LMAO in a dark way, but LMAO. Nancy Pelosi, friend of the show, wants the FBI to investigate pro-Palestine protesters. Why? Well, she insists Putin is orchestrating the pro-Palestine demonstrations and that demonstrators are Russian plants. Also note that the next day, when pro-Palestine protesters are outside Nancy Pelosi's house and urging her to back a ceasefire, this is a ceasefire, by the way. This is just a fucking ceasefire.
Nothing controversial.
She yelled out when getting into the backseat of her SUV, she yelled, "Go back to China where your headquarters is." Not R, by the way. Bad grammar.
She's real normal. She's being real normal.
She's a real normal one.
Yeah,
she's great. Yeah. So pro-Palestine protesters are both Russian plants and also are Chinese, I guess, spies. So I'm Russian and Chinese apparently, which is pretty big news to me.
I think the reason that she's going with this line is because there have been officials from the Chinese Communist Party who have said that there should be a ceasefire, and also Putin has said that there should be a ceasefire. And it's like, here's the thing, let's say that every pro-Palestine protest are filled with Russians and Chinese expats, they're all getting informed from Russia and China and stuff like that. They would still be protesting for the right thing. They would still be asking for the correct thing to happen, which is that there should be no more killing in Gaza. So what now? Like, what's the big idea Nancy.
No, you have to see it's an evil conspiracy to stop genocide.
This is true. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Putin.
Putin though, Putin, he's always ruining things for the Democrats.
Putler, which is it's a combination of Hitler and Putin. Putler. I saw that in a fucking house in my neighborhood, by the way.
Cool. Very cool, normal stuff from the US, as per usual.
That concludes our Palestine segments. Thank you for hanging in there. And I want to remind you all that if you enjoy what you just heard, you enjoy Muel and his wonderful, beautiful kafia and our friendship, because we are friends. I want to remind you all that Red Planet is made possible by the direct support of our viewers. So please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/red_planet and become a patron today. You can become a patron for as little as $2, and we would immensely appreciate it. And then we can feed our producer Conrad. We can feed him his bucket of gruel. So, yeah. So let's go into the main segments. The main segment we're going to be doing today is Muel and I, apart from being friends, because that's going to be a big part of today's segment, we're going to be friends while discussing the history of Yemen. So the Houthis in Yemen are in the news constantly at the moment for their anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist attacks. But lots of people hearing that news don't actually know who they are or have any historical context or know about the historical context of politics or the politics of Yemen. And to save you a Wikipedia rabbit hole and reading a lot of Al Jazeera articles, we've compiled a brief history of Yemen and an explainer of the Houthi movement so you can understand the news about this group and their political context better.
I'm very excited to learn about Yemen. I don't know much about it. Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting things that I've seen in the notes. So I guess, the only thing, I guess we should start by saying, like, what we know or knew about Yemen before the recent support from Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis. I just knew that there was a famine, and it was the fault of the West. That's literally all I knew. I don't know if that's similar to your knowledge of Yemen.
For me, my knowledge of Yemen is Arab country, borders the Red Sea, one of the poorest countries, but showing up one of the hardest, arguably the hardest Arab country in terms of like standing up for Palestine, which I deeply appreciate, but poor because of like the West, effectively, which tends to be the trend. Poverty, where does it come from?
Yeah. So let's get started, because there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and neither me or Kira have read all of it. So yeah, it's time for us to do some learning with all you wonderful listeners of our amazing show. So, historical context of Yemen leading up to 20th century, geographic locations effect on regional politics. So Yemen is, as Kira said, on the Arabian Peninsula, south of Saudi Arabia, and with coasts on the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Its position has been a vital part of sea trade for thousands of years. This is because Aden, the capital in exile of Yemen, is a port that connects Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. For an idea of the significance of Aden during the World War II, New York was the only busier port in the entire world. And capital in exile here means where the government recognized by international bodies operates from. Sana'a is the capital, but it is under Houthi control, and we'll get to that. Control of Yemen and the port of Aden in particular has been a goal of various contesting colonial and imperial powers since at least the 15th century, with the Portuguese, the Ottomans, the British, the Ottomans again, and now the American Empire, and of course the British again, playing major parts in the politics of Yemen over the last few hundred years. Despite the trade through Aden, Yemen has been a very poor country for a very long time, currently the poorest in the Arab world and the country with the least access to clean water. And the way the country has been controlled has varied between total control in one area, known as Greater Yemen, regional divisions, foreign powers controlling the cities and religious figures controlling the rest of the country, and other splits. To get an idea of how empires tend to view Yemen, here's a quote from the Ottoman governor of Egypt when he was ordered to capture it.
Yemen is a land with no lord, an empty province. It would be not only possible, but easy to capture. And should it be captured, it would be master of the lands of India and send every year a great amount of gold and jewels to Constantinople.
So yeah, just basically, talking about the economic benefit of occupying Yemen, and also doing the same kind of stuff that Israel does to Palestine, saying that there's no land there, there's no people, there's no culture, kind of thing.
Up for grabs.
It's up for grabs, yeah. Despite this impression, empires have repeatedly had their shit clapped trying to conquer and hold Yemen, in part because of the mountainous terrain of the highlands, and in part because this impression that Yemen is a land with no lord came from the independence and individual sovereignty of different Zaidi tribes within Yemen, who, despite their differences, were historically very good at uniting to resist foreign powers. So I think that's a really important thing to focus on. This is, again, kind of like something similar, I want to say, to Myanmar, where you got like the military junta, reactionary, want to do genocide, all that kind of stuff, kind of like stuck in imperial colonialist attitudes. And then you have like all the various different rebel groups who are resisting that. And despite their differences, they're coming together to like fight this greater evil. So very similar in a lot of like anti-colonialist struggles all over the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that like this kind of makes sense. Whenever now I hear, like, thanks to my education, not just while doing this show, but also like in activism and speaking to people who do activism surrounding anti-imperialist stuff. Whenever I hear of a country like Yemen that has the history of Yemen in terms of like, well, I just knew it was a poor country and they had a famine. I'm just always going like, yeah, that's probably to do with colonialism. And so, yeah, this just confirms that, right? So, Kira, do you want to tell us about some further info regarding the Shia and Sunni Islam split?
Yeah, sure. So if you're wondering what Zaidi means, it's going to be relevant to take a little detour to talk about the biggest division in Islam between the Sunni and Shia Muslims. There are various differences in the practices and beliefs of Sunni and Shia Muslims, and historically the split originated with the question of who would succeed the Prophet Muhammad. So there's a whole thing there, but just know that according to most estimates, about 90% of the Muslim population of the world are Sunni, about 10% are Shia, although Shia Muslims are a majority in Iran, Iraq, Azerbaijan, and Bahrain. So in Yemen, between about 25 and 30% of the population are Shia, and mostly Zaidi, a branch of Shia Islam that originated in 740 AD. Zaidi Islam is often considered the most similar form of Shia to Sunni Islam. And despite the tensions between Sunni and Shia Muslims, there have been historically good relations between Zaidi Shia Muslims and Shafi'i Sunni Muslims, the most popular form of Sunni Islam in Yemen. The first Zaidi imam came to Yemen in 897 AD, and the sect has been a prominent part of Yemeni history ever since, with the Zaidi imamate existing in Yemen from 897 until 1962 in one form or another. To put it quite simply, Zaydism is a very important part of Yemeni national identity. So as with any time you try to make statements about like 1,000 years of history all at once, it's actually not easy to do because that's a lot of history. So it's going to be pretty complicated. There have been times when Zaidi imams have led the tribes to defend Yemeni sovereignty. And there have been times when they've been oppressive rulers. And there have been times where they were just kind of in the wrong place when some much more powerful neighbor wanted them out of the way, which brings us to the coup d'etat of 1962 and the North Yemen Civil War.
So, 1962 Civil War. The Mutawakalite, I think I'm saying that completely wrong, but Mutawakalite Kingdom of Yemen, or just the Kingdom of Yemen, existed as a state from 1918 and was the final continuous form of the Zaydi Imamate. In 1962, the Imam and also King Mohammed al-Badir was deposed by a coup backed by NASA, not the space, not NASA, not the US space organization, actually NASSE. That's the guy's name, NASA. The Arab socialist leader of Egypt. For the reasons stated above, 1,000 years of Zaydi Yemeni history, this is arguably a really bad example of socialist interventionism because it's trying to overthrow the nascent culture of the people in favor of what a socialist country thinks will be good for them. There was even another coup being plotted at the time within Yemen that wanted to get rid of al-Badir, but not get rid of the Zaydi Imamate. So I think that's a really important point. That's like, you know, a lot of the time the mistakes of socialism in the 20th century were definitely based around this bad understanding of culture and what people, you know, what the people in those countries actually wanted. And if there was any amount of on the ground discussion or diplomacy attempted with you know, various groups there, then there could have been a much more I guess positive support supplied, whether that be with aid, weapons, whatever, to actually, like, you know, help the people get what they wanted, you know, and I guess spread the word of socialism and you know, the goodness of socialism that way. However, Egypt poured troops into the ensuing conflict and fought on the side of the Yemen Arab Republic with support from the Soviet Union. On the other side, the royalists fought alongside troops from Saudi Arabia with support from our friend Israel and Jordan and Iran, Pakistan and Britain. The Yemen Arab Republic was victorious in the end, despite the war being absolutely disastrous for Egypt. It's actually pretty ironic because Nasser was trying to get rid of al-Badir to spread Arab socialism, and the state of North Yemen that ended up forming wasn't socialist, but there was actually a simultaneous revolution in British-controlled Aden and the rest of Yemen, which formed the state of South Yemen, or the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. Let's fucking go!
So, yeah. Let's talk about the ML Republic of Yemen from 1967 to 1990. So at the same time as the civil war in North Yemen that formed the Yemen Arab Republic, there was also an uprising against the British by a Marxist group called the National Liberation Front, the NLF, and a nationalist militant group called the Front for Liberation of Occupied South Yemen, which is FLOSSY. The British declared a state of emergency in 1963 and brought down the force of the empire on Yemeni rebels using the RAF to set fire to the entire Radfan Hills area in 1964, which was where the NLF had a lot of its support. So technically, Britain has been doing airstrikes in Yemen for 61 years. The NLF was too radical for Nasser and the Egyptians, so Nasser gave support to the Flossie nationalists, but in 1967, Nasser lost the Six-Day War and couldn't spare the military support anymore, leading Flossie to be defeated by the NLF relatively soon after, and the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen was born. As a side note, it's really interesting to like discuss this history because a lot of the Egyptian history and a lot of these like these Marxist groups also and these like socialist interventions also have a lot to do with Palestine's history and the resistance, the history of resistance in Palestine. So it's really neat to learn like all these like, I don't want to say smaller stories because they're all kind of part of one bigger one, but it's always pretty interesting to be like, oh yeah, I know that guy, I know that Nasser guy. Yeah,
I think it's really important. We definitely in the West amongst the left do not appreciate the struggles that the left had in you know, in the Middle East. I think that like that's definitely very overlooked. You know, you'll find that not even people are aware of certain contemporary things like the Rojava in northeastern Syria, who are basically like a bunch of Kurds who are like, you know, women-led, anarchist, communist, and they've been like, they basically single-handedly destroyed ISIS. And they also like, are resisting a genocide from Turkey like all the time. And I just think that like, people, especially white people in the West, like they just see brown people with guns and they go, they're probably bad. Right. And it's just so racist. It's so annoying. So I think it's really good to like, learn about this stuff for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen existed for about 23 years, and it was supported by Cuba, East Germany, North Korea, and the Soviet Union, and was run through local representative people's councils headed by the Supreme People's Council. Women were made equal to men under the law, and arranged marriages and child marriage was abolished. Education, health, and welfare programs were introduced, and people in South Yemen were guaranteed a universal basic living standard. East Germany sent a bunch of Stasi officers to train secret police, which sucks, but also to create an arms trafficking route to Palestine, which fucks.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Critical support to the Stasi there. Yeah.
The People's Democratic Republic of Yemen started to fall apart in 1986 when factions within the ruling party, the Yemen Socialist Party, fought a short but very deadly civil war, making the state politically unstable. Relations between North Yemen and South Yemen had been relatively good throughout the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen's existence, with talks toward unification ongoing the whole time. And since the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen was the largest state and contained the port of Aden, it seemed fairly clear that they would be the bigger party in the unification and fold North Yemen into them. But after the Civil War and the destabilization, the tables turned. And when unification finally happened in 1990, the right to private property was established. But on the other hand, Yemen was one country again for the first time in literally centuries. So pretty bittersweet. When the new Republic of Yemen was formed in 1990, Ali Salim al-Baid, who was the leader of the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, became the vice president, and the president was the leader of North Yemen, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Oh, I know this guy. Saleh had been president of North Yemen since 1978, and understanding a bit more about Saleh helps us understand the next 3 decades of Yemeni politics, and in particular, the rise of the Houthis.
There you go. There you go. So now we're going to talk about Ali Abdullah Saleh. He was born to a poor family in the vicinity of Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, in 1947. In 1958, at the age of 11, he joined the North Yemen military. And at the age of 15, he took part in the 1962 coup to remove King al-Badr that we mentioned earlier. When I was 15, I was just like smoking weed and playing in bands. Cringe. But anyway, let's move on. By the age of 22, Saleh had risen to the rank of major, and sometime in the 70s, he met the then president of North Yemen, Ahmed al-Ghashmi, who is described as Saleh's mentor. Saleh was never seen as particularly religious despite fighting with jihadist and devout Islamic militants throughout his career. It seems that he saw Islamic militants as a force and a political and military tool in the region more than anything. But we'll get there. In 1977, al-Ghashmi appointed Saleh as the leader of a large coastal governorate in western Yemen called Taiz. Then in 1978, a year later, al-Ghashmi went to meet and envoy the president of the PDRY, which had a briefcase for him supposedly containing a secret message. But the secret message was, "You're dead," because the briefcase exploded and killed al-Ghashmi. Incidentally, the president of the PDRY was executed in a coup 3 days later. After the explosion killed al-Ghashmi, Saleh was appointed to a 4-man provisional presidential council and then elected by the North Yemen parliament to the presidency, making him the head of both the government and the military. Although the narrative for a long time was that the assassination of al-Ghashmi had been set up by an explosive expert from the Yemeni Socialist Party and the PDRY, there is one source who claims that Ali al-Shatir confessed to him personally as having actually set the explosives. Al-Shatir was a major general and a head of the moral guidance department in the Yemeni army, and he was extremely close to Ali Abdullah Saleh for decades. Alex Jones voice, do your own research, etc. Saleh was president of North Yemen for 12 years. After that, filing his administration with family members and loyal supporters at every level and strengthening ties between North Yemen and Western powers by bringing Yemen into the global oil trade. In the 1980s, he created his own political party, the General People's Congress, GPC, and after unification in 1993, the Republic of Yemen held its first parliamentary election. Although the GPC were outnumbered in total by seats that supported socialism and Yemeni autonomy, they were split between different parties, and so with 122 of the 301 seats, the GPC became the ruling party. This led pretty quickly to another civil war in 1994, in which South Yemen and the Yemeni Socialist Party seceded and formed the Democratic Republic of Yemen, like the PDRY, but it wasn't recognized by international bodies, but the DRY was crushed by Saleh's military very quickly. This swift military victory was made possible in part by jihadists from Egypt that were active in South Yemen at the time, to which Saleh's security forces turned a blind eye. This fits into a long pattern of Saleh allying with or tacitly supporting Islamic forces. For instance, after 9/11, he explicitly joined in on America's war on terror, but it has been alleged that Saleh directly supported Al-Qaeda in Yemen while asking for more money from America to help catch terrorists, including one instance in 2006 where Al-Qaeda convicts escaped, in quotes, Yemeni prison. An Al-Qaeda operative who became an informant alleged the same. Hani Mohammed Mujahid 38 told Al Jazeera that many Al-Qaeda leaders were under the complete control of Ali Abdullah Saleh. Ali Abdullah Saleh turned Al-Qaeda into an organized criminal gang. He was not only playing with the West, he was playing with the entire world. Just like Max said in Always Sunny, I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top. Saleh repeatedly passed motions that extended his own term limits throughout the 2000s, with a brief minute in 2005 where he pretended he wasn't going to run again in the election, but then he said that the public demanded that he run, like, oh no, oh shit, they're going to make me be president again. Oh well. But in reality, there was a growing dissatisfaction with his brutal rule, his suppression of political enemies, and his relationship with the West. And during the Arab Spring protests, when they broke out and Saleh was ousted from office in 2012. And finally, this brings us to the Houthis.
Thank you, Muel. We haven't talked about the Zaydis in a second. Basically, since the 1962 coup that removed King al-Badr, what happened to them? Well, for the same reasons that they had already survived 1,000 years of imperial conquests, the Zaydi tribes didn't just disappear. The Zaydis remained powerful in their historic stronghold of Saada, just south of the Saudi-Yemeni border, and the rest of the Yemeni government found it consistently difficult to hold any power in the Saada governance. Hussein Ba-Reddin al-Houthi was a Zaydi religious leader born in 1959 in Saada, who took a part in a very small fringe religious political party called the Truth Party, which there's next to no reporting about except that it was a Zaydi party that wanted to promote Shia Islam. It only ever won 2 seats in the Yemeni parliament, and its support of South Yemen independence caused al-Houthi to flee the country and stay in Iran for some time. After he returned to Yemen, he became extremely vocal on Saleh's government being imperialist stooges, accusing them of financial corruption and of putting the interests of America and Saudi Arabia over the interests of Yemeni people. This led Saleh to start claiming al-Houthi was a fake religious leader, trying to set himself up as an imam and essentially start a new Zaydi kingdom. Part of these accusations may probably fair, but considering al-Houthi was a very real religious leader and devout Shia Muslim, and Saleh had repeatedly manipulated Muslims for political gain, this didn't do Saleh any favors. So in 2004, Saleh put out a $55,000 bounty on al-Houthi, later raising it to $75,500. And fighting broke out between al-Houthi's group Ansar Allah, colloquially known as the Houthis, and the government forces in the Saada governance. Hussein al-Houthi was killed in late 2004, but This only galvanized the Houthis further. And you can make the argument that killing Hussein al-Houthi was like very, very foolish because Zaydism's founding story is literally of their religious leader, is Imam Zayd dying in a hopeless rebellion against an unjust caliphate. So making a martyr out of al-Houthi was probably not the best idea if you're trying to, eliminate his influence. The Yemeni government and lots of Western media have alleged that the Houthis are funded and directed by Iran, one of the world's only Shia Muslim governments. It seems somewhat likely that Iran does financially support the Houthis, but not that it directs or controls their actions. And we discussed a similar, we discussed that relationship earlier in the news with Iran's influence as like the effective leader of the axis of resistance. After Hussein's death, his brother, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, became the political and military leader of the group, and their father, Badreddin al-Houthi, became the spiritual and religious leader. In 2005, Saleh's government offered the Houthis a presidential pardon if they surrendered, but the Houthis rejected it, and the fighting between the Houthis continued on and off for the next 6 years, with more anti-government forces joining the Zaidi militants. In 2011, during the Arab Spring, protests against Saleh's government reached a boiling point, and the Houthis declared their support for a pro-democracy reorganization and removal of Saleh, with large Houthi blocs present at all of the large pro-democracy protests. In March 26th that year, the Houthis officially declared that the Saada government was independent and under their political control. With al-Qaeda, who are Sunni, still active in Yemen, as fighting spread across the region, the Houthis were frequently hostile to Sunni Muslims and vice versa, although many Sunni Muslims also fought with them for the regime change. Salafi militants in al-Qaeda continued in persecution of Shia Muslims, with al-Qaeda targeting both Houthi fighters and Shia Muslims attending prayer with car bombs and suicide bombers. It should be noted that Salafi is a branch of like hyper-conservative Sunni Islam that supports the implementation of Quranic literalist hyper-reactionary law. After months of fighting and protests, a presidential election was held in February of 2012 with a huge turnout, where the new president, Abdrabbuh Mansour al-Hadi, won 99.8% of the vote, and Saleh finally left office after 33 years. The fighting across this period between Houthis and Salafis had killed 200 people, while most of the political activity had been in large-scale protests, marches, and demonstrations against the government. Over the next few years, the new president al-Hadi became extremely unpopular as he continued Saleh's legacy, did not think about the fuel prices, which were a huge focus of the protests that had seen Saleh deposed, and failed to stop the Houthis. In late 2014, the Houthis reached the capital city of Sana'a, and their political jurisdiction covered roughly the whole region that had formerly been North Yemen / the Kingdom of Yemen. This was the beginning of the currently ongoing Yemeni civil war. And Muel, could you tell me more about that?
Yes, I can. Civil war. Here we go. In this civil war, the sides are broadly between the Houthis in the northwest and the Republic of Yemen in the rest of the country. The Houthis control the Yemeni capital Sana'a, while the Republic of Yemen controls the port of Aden, to which al-Hadi fled after he was deposed. The Republic of Yemen is supported by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and 8 other countries in the region, directly with troops and otherwise supported by the US, UK, France, Canada, and South Korea. There is also a non-aligned region and a small region controlled by AQAP, Al-Qaeda, in the Arabian Peninsula. Ali Abdullah Saleh wasn't done trying to grab all the power he could, of course, and so in early 2015, he tried to pull the same trick again, one last time, by declaring that he was going to ally with the Houthis. Saleh's supporters worked with the Houthis to capture Sana'a, at which point Saleh had said that he was done working with the Houthis and was going to ally with Saudi Arabia and al-Hadi instead. Again, like Max said, in Sunni, I'm playing both sides so I can always come out on top. But this time, playing both sides didn't help Saleh, and in 2017, his supporters were defeated by the Houthis, and Saleh himself was killed by a Houthi sniper. After capturing the capital, the Houthis set up the Supreme Revolutionary Committee, which over the next 2 years carefully managed the transition of power and established the Supreme Political Council. It is unclear whether this is any kind of reference to the PDRY's Supreme People's Council, though the Houthi territory doesn't explicitly claim any kind of socialist ideology. So what are the Houthis' policies? Do you want to take a little look at this for us, Kira?
Their politics? Sure. And I will say that the Saleh guy seems like a nightmare to date. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Probably no good. Flip-floppy motherfucker. Okay. This next section largely comes from a Newsweek article, Rise of the Houthis. So the scream is the Houthis calling card, which is a phrase translated from al-Sarqa in Arabic, proclaiming death to America, death to Israel, damn the Jews, victory to Islam. It is usually more of a clarion call than a threat, especially when followed with this large smile and a belly laugh by the screamer. So it was first shouted by Hussein al-Houthi in the ancient Grand Mosque of Sana'a in 2004. And it was the scream that started the multiple wars of the Yemeni government against the Houthis. Despite the Arabic words, adherents tend to claim it is to call attention to the governments of the West, never to harm individuals. The Houthis have never attacked anything of Western interest and in fact have a common enemy with America, Al-Qaeda. We really do not really want death to anyone, said Ali al-Bukhaiti, the former spokesperson and official media face of the Houthis, during an interview last September. The slogan is simply against the interference of those governments, which is pretty consistent with much of the language used by anti-imperialists, like Arab entities, I should say, Arab, like not even specifically Arab, like imperial periphery. Let's just say imperial periphery, especially in the Middle East, to say death to blank.
Yeah.
It is always funny to see liberals freak the fuck out over that language, though. The Yemen Times sat down. This is an article that we're quoting right now. Let me see if we can link it in the chats from the YemenTimes.com. So Yemen Times sat down with Hussein al-Bukhaiti, a self-described Houthi activist who is familiar with the inner workings of the group. He's confident that the Houthis have done well since entering Sana'a. When security forces disappeared, he said, they filled in their ranks, successfully ensuring the security of Sana'a's residents. They also removed, quote, 2 main sources of terrorism in the capital, quote, which two, al-Bukhaiti, were Ali Mohsen and the Iman University, excuse me. Given Yemen's religious composition, al-Bukhaiti does not think that the Iranian system could ever be implemented in the country. Neither do the Houthis have any interest in bringing back the imametes. Instead, he describes the Zaidi doctrine as Republican and the Houthi group as liberal. So some say the Houthis strive to bring back the imamate. What do you think of that? They always say that this is the secret agenda of Ansar Allah, which is the name of the Houthis, like what they name themselves. Look at the NDC outcomes. Ansar Allah said Yemen is a republic and the elections are the way to reach power. They also said women have the right to hold any position, even that of the president. Their vision was so civil in comparison to other parties. Ansar Allah was liberal and open more than any other party in the NDC. So let us put Ansar Allah to the test. Returning to the Imam's rule is absolutely unacceptable. We have never talked about this. Even Abdullah Malik al-Houthi himself said the Zaidi doctrine is Republican.
There you go. So that's it. That's what we're up to now, essentially. And yeah, it's kind of one of those things, right? It's like, you know, if you have a faction that is resisting imperialism, resisting colonialism and stuff like that, but they say some problematic stuff, yeah, cool. I think it's important to point out that problematic stuff, like, but if that problematic stuff turns you into a vile war hawk who wants to see them completely ended and genocided in the same way you want to see other marginalized groups genocided, then I think you got some issues with your politics, maybe. I think it's been a really good bit of learning that. I had absolutely no idea about the history of Yemen in that way in particular, and I think that it makes a lot of sense why people are describing the Houthis and Ansar Allah as like the actual control, like the actual party, the rulers of Yemen, or representative of the people or whatever. I think that, like, again, like going back to sort of like a really intense rule, like, oppressive rule by the imam is it's gonna fuck people up, right? It's gonna fuck people up. And yeah, I think that again, you can see why they support the Palestinian struggle. You can see why the Houthis are constantly trying to, like, help the Palestinians liberate themselves. It just makes sense. Like, it just makes sense.
It is very frustrating, though, to see how much they're putting themselves out there, like physically, like monetarily, et cetera, to stand up for Palestinians, and doing so in a way that apparently it's amazing how the West still has a fucking issue with it. I mean, I understand why they do, because it's the West and they care about capital above all and power. And so the Houthis are directly threatening that. But it is very frustrating to see how much this extremely poor country and people that are dealing with a civil war are still stepping up to do what they can to help Palestinians in a very profound, direct way that is getting results, like massively getting results, versus other countries that are not doing that. Like Gulf countries, for instance.
Yeah, there's barely any,
which have way more money and influence, for the record.
Yeah. There's barely any actions being done in any other surrounding country. Like, I think there are some activists in Egypt, but like Egypt is pretty, like, has got a lot of shit on lock surrounding Palestine because it's so close. But nothing like to the extent of what Yemeni Houthis are doing. You've also got, like, the opportunity to do so many things in a lot of ways there as well. Like, if you were to, like, actually, like, help people get liberated from Palestine in a way that was, like, pretty decent, you could try and do something like open the Rafah crossing. Do you know what I mean? You could, like, protest at the Rafah crossing. I know there've been lots of protests at the Rafah crossing, but, like, actual direct action where we're not shooting Palestinians who want to, like, swim around or, like, use the sea, which is their sea, to escape the genocide and stuff like that. Because again, there are people who do not want to flee Gaza because that's their right and it's their land and they don't want to leave there. And there are some people who want to flee, and that's their right. They should have that right. They should have that freedom of movement. And that's just kind of like one thing that I could think of, like, if there's some way that you could, like, do the do some kind of positive direct action if you're in Egypt, kind of thing,
Yeah, I hear you. It's just very oof. I'm just critical support for the Houthis' resistance against the continued occupation and genocide of Palestine.
I'm really sorry. My cat is just, like, in a place where he cannot be.
That's right, you have a cat.
Get
This is a relatively new development for Muel.
Yeah,
I know this because I'm his friend, and friends know about each other's cat situations. And I know my friend Muel didn't have a cat, but now he does have a cat.
I did not have a cat, and now I do. The cat's great. Thanks for asking. Yeah, if we're gonna do this, yeah, he's doing really well. He's got fleas, and we suspect he
He
might
has
have
fleas.
got fleas, even though he's an inside cat and has never been outside in his entire life. Apparently, don't know how that's possible.
You're
But
gonna do a flea shampoo or whatever.
so the vet said, and I agree with this because like cats, like they're super traumatized. You probably know this, Kira, but like animals have like a very lower threshold for trauma than humans. So like any kind of like stuff like that, like for example, like he pooped on himself today, and I had to wipe him down, and that definitely traumatized him. He was not down for that, even though like it would have made him sick, it would have made us sick or
He
whatever.
pooped on himself.
Yeah,
Poor
he
thing.
pooped on himself. You really got to get out of there, buddy. You're gonna give yourself an electric shock. Cool that this is happening right now. And he didn't poop on himself in like a weird way. He just poops on himself in the way that like any kind of, you know,
Yeah, the way that
animal.
we all poop on ourselves.
Exactly. Everyone's pooped on themselves. Exactly.
Don't hoity-toity in front of me.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
Which one? Who among us has not pooped themselves?
Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, he's doing okay, and he got like his dewormer, and for fleas, he's got this like they got this like pipette thing that you have to like put on the back of their head so that they can't lick it off. And so I did that the other day, but he's definitely like way more active immediately after like I tried to crush up his dewormer tablet and put that in his food, but he just did not. He was not down for that. So I had to get him in a towel and get it in the back of his mouth so he would eat it. And it's like, it just feels so horrible because it's like you're hurting them, but you know it's like they need it. So
I think about this all the time. I thought about this today because I was I was staying at my friend's place for the past few days, and I brought the bunnies over because my friend set up a whole room for the bunnies. Yeah, it was really sweet. So I could like spend more time there without panicking, because otherwise I'm like, I just have to keep going home every, I don't want to leave them. It's terrifying. But in an effort for me to like have some semblance of mental health and like social life of some sort, be able to hang out with my friend and like, kind of try to, the whole thing we were talking about earlier. I'm like, I want to bring my bunnies so I can make sure I take care of them, make sure they're all taken care of. But they don't know that. They just think I'm an asshole who's just like moving them and just like putting them on a bumpy car ride, then dumping them in a room that they're like, what the fuck is this room? It's not even as big as the other room I was in. And like, it smells different. And there's cats outside meowing and like clawing at the door. It's just like, and then I pick them up, put them in a carrier and bring them back home. And then just like Ruffian is so mad at me. He's so mad at me right now. And I'm like, I can't explain it to you, bud. I feel so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to get out of there, buddy.
Oh,
I'm
God.
sorry.
I'm realizing these headphones are going to go too because Ruffian chewed on them. Anyways, homework is, you know what? Homework, just be nice to somebody.
I like that.
It's not very relevant, or it is relevant, but it's not very specific. But you know what? Be nice to somebody.
Find someone, and if they're nice to you and they've not done anything horrible to you, then yeah, be nice to them, because it's nice to be nice. But at this juncture, it is extremely important to mention that we are a show, and our show needs you to be nice to us, and you are nice to us.
If you want to do your homework right now, you want to be a go-getter, be an extra, get an extra gold star,
then you can go to Red Planet on Patreon, which is patreon.com/red_planet, and you can support us from as little as £2 a month to as much as £85 a month. We're going to go through all those options right now, aren't we, Kira?
Yes, we are, Muel.
Yeah. So the first way that you could support us on patreon.com/red_planet is with Sprite Mode. It's £2 a month, and you can get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite. And benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you are helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, and access to the Red Planet Discord. Wow, that would be really, really cool. But there's another tier and another mode that you could go into and support us with. And Kira's going to tell us about that now.
Yeah, that's called Goblin Mode for $10 a month, or I guess £8.50 or something like that, I believe.
Yes.
All right. Everyone loves a goblin. You'll get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from sprite mode, a cool or pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only places like that, and access to the Red Planet exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts, which we need to have one of those soon.
Yeah, we should try and organize one. Me and Tim need to watch the end of Zeitgeist, and
The end of Zeitgeist.
I know, yeah, because we went through so much of it, and we spoke about so much of it. It ended up being like 3 hours, and we only got through halfway through the documentary. Well, it's not a documentary; it's conspiracy theory nonsense.
How dare you?
I know, yeah, I know. So basically, that's that. So we need to do that, and then me and Kira, we should do one, and hopefully me and Kira and Tim as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Get one organized. So we're gonna get one organized in February. But after Goblin Mode, we got Beast Mode. Holy shit! Are you actually gonna go Beast Mode? It's £17 a month or $20 a month. Holy shit, are you actually gonna go Beast Mode? Well then, we can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yeah, pin badges. Wear your excellent new Red Planet pin badge literally everywhere. It's completely good and cool and good to do so, and I gotta get this cat out of this room immediately.
Oh, thank you, Muel. I appreciate that. But if you want to go even harder than that, if you want to go even harder and you're disgusting, you're kind of you're what we call sick. You're a sick fuck, right? Then you're gonna want to go. You're gonna want to go sicko mode for $100 a month or £85.
Yes.
If you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all of the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of every stream. So, JBP, Maryland Starfire, Queen Pib, Cassie Tastrophe, and Risk Inverse. Thank you to our sickos for supporting us. You're filthy.
The worst. Some of the worst, disgusting, nasty, wonderful people. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderfully, wonderfully sick. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
The cat thinks it's a game now. The cat thinks me shutting him out of the room is a game, and he's opening the door and enjoying it. It's good though. It's good though because he knows basically what it is I got him a new toy, because with cat toys you're supposed to like activate their predator instincts. And so like I got him like a special toy that's got like actual like bird feathers on it, or like I think they might be fake. I'm not sure about it. But like when I got him that toy, I've never seen anything like it. He was like hissing at it and everything, and like he really wanted to fucking kill it. And he really loves it. So what he's doing by annoying me, he knows that this works. He's annoying me on purpose so that I'll play with him with that. And then we finish like the cycle of him like hunting the cat, hunting the thing and killing it, and finish that with like food. So that's what he wants. But you know, apart from my cat, I want to know, Kira, where I can find out more about my friend, my real friend. We're friends. My friend Kira, she's coming to England to see me, my friend, just to see me on my own. No one else, literally just me. Where can I find out more about her?
Well, you can find out more. You can find me, other than England someday soon, hopefully. You can find me in my link tree. So linktree.ee/KiraChats. My links are in there. I am streaming on YouTube right now, but I think I'm going to start getting back to it this week because I'm just getting so weirded out by not streaming. Also, money. Do you know you need money to live? kind of sucks. I hate it, but you need it. So I'll be probably streaming this week on my YouTube. So just KiraChats on YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter, although I don't really use Twitter anymore. It's also KiraChats. My blue sky is kirachats.bsky.social. But the main places you can find me, it's my Discord and Blue Sky, and also my YouTube when I start streaming again this week. So my Discord is discord.gg/KiraChats. I'm very, very active there. It's kind of embarrassing. Like, I need to get a life. But where can I find my friend Muel? Other than Manchester area, sort of.
That's the Manchester area. I'm all over Manchester area. That's where you can find me.
You are Manchester. That's amazing.
I am. It's true. That's why it's called Manchester, because I'm a man and I have a chest.
True.
That's true.
Wow, the etymology is amazing.
Whoa. You can find me on linktree.ee/DJ Muel. That's DJ MUEL. What's going on with me? Well, my new video is going to be coming out very soon, possibly tomorrow, maybe the day after. Depends how much I get done after the show tonight. All I've got to do is like a little bit, but it's basically, as I said at the start of the show, it's about AI, and it's about how being a creative under capitalism is not too great, and that's maybe why AI exists. So yeah, if you want to hear an absolutely bizarre brain poison take, making everything political, even though I agree that everything is political, then check out my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/C/DJ MUEL. Or I think you can @ me on YouTube. I don't know. I think it's like @DJ MUEL, all one word. And yeah, so that should be out either tomorrow or the day after. But if you're a Patreon supporter of mine, supporting a £10 or above, you will get access to that video 24 hours before it goes out. So if that's something that you want to be interested in, have a chance of seeing that early before everybody else, either tonight or tomorrow night, then head on over to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/DJ MUEL, and subscribe at £10 or above. But there are also other options. You could support me from £2 and £5 as well. There are other benefits to that. You can check them out there. As I said, I was unbanned on Twitter. You can get me, watch my posting sickness, develop. It happened as soon as I was unbanned. That's @DJ Muel _. And I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm also on TikTok. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on all the places. You can get me all over there. And let's not forget our co-host who isn't here because he's away doing bass stuff that I'm sure he's going to talk about next week. It's Tim, and he's at linktree.ee/Dread Conquest. You can get him on Twitter. You can get him on Twitch. You can check out some of his amazing YouTube videos, which are timeless. And you can go find that on YouTube at Conquest of Dread.
His videos are so cool.
Really, really, really cool.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm friends with that guy. What the hell? Why is he friends with me? He's so
well,
cool.
yeah, that I'm constantly thinking that actually. I
like how we're not saying that about each other.
Yeah.
We're like, no, we're friends, obviously, but like,
no, we're friends. Obviously, we're friends. Like, come on, we're basically the same.
Tim is so cool.
But Tim, like, oh, Jesus Christ. But no, yeah, I'm always thinking this, but I don't say it to him, over voice or personally, because I don't want to like put pressure on him. If he
he's not here. He's not going to see this.
I really want him to make more videos. Like, I'm desperate for more Tim shit, honestly.
You're a Tim head.
I'm a Tim head. I'm one of the biggest Tim heads out there. So, but he's got a lot of other cool stuff that he's working on at the minute. And of course he does this show with us. So, you can get as much Tim as everybody else is getting.
If you become a patron, you can get more Tim.
That's right. So, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. It's been amazing. And thank you, Kira, for being my friend and co-host on this amazing show that we do. We don't raid people anymore because we're on YouTube. So, I don't know. That's just the end of the show.
Can we do this?
Let's do that. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.